My name is Sarah. I'm in my early 30s, and I'm here to tell you a story about the moment my entire world fractured and how putting it back together meant tearing down everything I thought I knew about family, loyalty, and worth. If you've ever poured your heart and soul into something, only to have the people closest to you diminish your achievement, silence your voice, and ultimately betray your trust, then this story might resonate with you. Maybe you felt like you weren't seen, not truly, by the very people who were supposed to champion you. If any of that sounds familiar, please consider hitting the like button. And if you want to hear more stories about navigating complex, often painful, family dynamics and finding your own strength, subscribe to my channel. Tell me where you're watching from in the comments below. It helps me feel connected to you all. What happened to me after I secured a $3 billion joint venture was worse than anything I could have imagined, but it also became the catalyst for the most profound transformation of my life. Let me tell you the whole story. I grew up in the shadow of the family business. It wasn't a global empire, not back then, but it was solid, respectable, built by my grandfather, and then painstakingly grown by my parents. They specialized in manufacturing, a niche market, high-quality components, a steady stream of loyal clients. From the time I was a child, dinner table conversations revolved around production quotas, supplier issues, and market trends. It was in my blood, or so I was always told. My brother, David, was older, the golden child, the one always destined to take over. He had the charm, the easy confidence that I, the quiet, bookish one, often lacked. He joined the company straight out of college, groomed for leadership. I went away to study, getting my master's in international business, feeling the unspoken pressure to acquire skills that would someday serve the family legacy, but also nurturing a quiet desire to prove myself independently. When I finally joined the company, it felt less like coming home and more like entering a new phase of probation. My parents, bless them, had a particular way of showing affection that often felt like thinly veiled criticism. My father, Mr. Thompson Sr., ran the operations with a firm, often unyielding hand. My mother, Martha, handled the financials and client relations, a master of subtle influence and maintaining appearances. David was already vice president, his office larger, his title grander, even though my initial role involved analyzing global markets, something entirely new to the company. I worked tirelessly. I wanted to prove I wasn't just the daughter who'd gone off to get fancy degrees. I was a valuable asset. I identified untapped markets, streamlined supply chains, implemented new software that saved thousands. I didn't expect lavish praise, but I hoped for recognition, a feeling that my contributions were genuinely valued alongside David's more traditional role within the existing structure. Recognition was rare. Often, my ideas were met with skepticism, my successes downplayed. That's nice, Sarah, but is it sustainable? Or, David handles the important client relationships, but good job on that report, it chipped away at me, but I told myself it was just their way, that they appreciated me deep down. Family was family, and we all worked for the same goal, right? Over the next few years, I carved out a niche for myself in business development and strategic partnerships. I had a knack for seeing the bigger picture, for identifying opportunities that lay outside our traditional scope. David focused on maintaining the status quo, optimizing existing processes. We were different, and I thought our combined strengths could make the company formidable. But there was an underlying tension. My parents, particularly my mother, seemed wary of change, protective of the established order, which meant protective of David's place at the top of that order. The opportunity for the joint venture arose unexpectedly. A massive international corporation, a leader in complementary technology, was looking for a partner with our specific manufacturing expertise to develop a new product line that would bridge our industries. It was a game changer. It would dwarf any project we had ever undertaken, open up global markets we could only dream of, and solidify our position in the industry for decades. It was also incredibly complex, fraught with risks, requiring months of intense negotiation, legal wrangling, and cultural bridging. Nobody else in the company had the skill set or the international contacts to even initiate the conversation. It fell to me. My father was hesitant. $3 billion, Sarah? That's astronomical. Are you sure we're ready for something like this? My mother was even more resistant. It sounds very complicated, dear. And what about our current clients? Will this distract us? David was openly dismissive. It's probably a waste of time, Sarah. These big companies just want to pick our brains. It'll never happen. Despite their doubts, I pushed. I saw the potential, the necessity of evolving. I spent months working on the proposal, flying back and forth across continents, navigating language barriers and corporate politics. I was fueled by adrenaline, by the sheer scale of the challenge, and yes, by the desperate hope that this, finally, would prove my worth unequivocally. I lived and breathed that deal. I missed family dinners, canceled vacations, worked through weekends. My apartment became a satellite office, buried under stacks of paper, financial models, and legal documents. The negotiations were brutal. There were moments I thought it would all fall apart. Cultural misunderstandings, disagreements over equity, clashes over operational control. There were late-night calls filled with frustration, moments of despair where I wondered if David and my parents were right, if I was chasing a fantasy. But I believed in the value we brought, in the synergy of the partnership. I found allies within the corporation, people who saw my vision and championed the deal from their side. After 9 grueling months, it happened. We signed the agreement. A $3 billion joint venture, the single largest, most transformative deal in the history of our family business, and I had brought it home. The signing ceremony was held in a grand conference room. Representatives from both companies gathered, flashing cameras, formal speeches. I remember feeling a surge of pride, a sense of profound accomplishment that resonated bone deep. I had done it. Against the odds, against the skepticism, against the subtle resistance, I had landed a deal that would redefine our future. I called my parents immediately after. My voice was trembling with excitement. We did it. It's signed. $3 billion. There was a brief pause on the other end. Then my father's voice measured. That's very good, Sarah. Very good. Congratulations, my mother took the phone. Oh, Sarah, that's wonderful news. You must be exhausted. Come home and get some rest, David. When I spoke to him later, offered a curt, guess you pulled it off. Their reaction felt muted. I told myself they were just understated people, not prone to grand displays of emotion. They would celebrate properly when I got back. We'd pop champagne. They'd tell me how proud they were, finally acknowledge that I wasn't just the quiet daughter anymore, but a key player in their legacy. When I returned, the atmosphere at home and the office was strangely normal. There was no banner, no office celebration, not even a team lunch. A brief announcement was made at the weekly staff meeting, sandwiched between updates on production efficiency and warehouse logistics. My father mentioned the joint venture, credited the efforts of our strategic partnerships team, and briefly nodded in my direction. No fanfare. No spotlight. Just a quick acknowledgement before moving on to David's update on the new inventory system. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. This wasn't the overwhelming validation I had worked so hard for. But I pushed the feeling down. Maybe the real celebration would be at home, a private family affair. That evening, we had dinner. The conversation drifted around the usual topics: the weather, local gossip, David's new car. I kept waiting for one of them to bring up the deal, to ask me details, to say something, anything that showed they grasped the magnitude of what had happened. Finally, I couldn't stand it anymore. I brought it up myself. So, about the joint venture, it's really going to change things, isn't it? My father nodded, buttering his bread. Yes, well, it's a good opportunity, Sarah. Provided we manage it correctly. Large projects like this can be disruptive if not handled with care. My mother added, it means a lot more work, of course. We'll need to be very careful with expenses. And make sure it doesn't take too much focus away from our core business. David chimed in, a slight smirk on his face. Yeah, don't want to get ahead of ourselves. Big numbers sound nice on paper, but executing is the hard part. That's where the real work begins. The air felt thick with a strange mix of apprehension and resentment. It wasn't the enthusiastic embrace of a monumental achievement. It was cautious, almost dismissive. It was as if they were deliberately trying to shrink the accomplishment to minimize its significance and, by extension, my role in it. I left dinner feeling deflated, confused, and deeply hurt. Over the next few weeks, the subtle dismissals escalated. My responsibilities related to the joint venture, which should have been expanded, were instead slowly siphoned away. Meetings I should have led were chaired by David or my father. Communication channels I had established with the partner corporation were rerouted. When I asked why, I was met with vague explanations. It's better if we have a unified point of contact, Sarah. David is vice president. It makes sense for him to oversee the integration, or your expertise was in getting the deal done, dear. The operational side is different. It felt like a physical erasure. Everything I had built was being handed off, piece by piece, to people who had doubted it from the start. The validation I craved, the recognition of my unique contribution, was evaporating before my eyes. I tried to talk to my parents individually. I went to my father first. Dad, I don't understand what's happening. I secured this massive deal, and now I'm being sidelined from it. He sighed, looking tired. Sarah, you did a good job with the negotiations. But the company needs stability now. David understands our systems, our people. He's the future of the company, the one who will be taking over. This new venture is a big undertaking. It needs to be integrated into our existing structure, not operate as some separate entity. But I am part of the existing structure, and I know this deal better than anyone. I spent 9 months living it. I protested, my voice rising. Lower your voice, Sarah. We are making sound business decisions. This isn't about you. It's about the company's future, he said. It's not about you in a way that made it feel entirely about not wanting me to be central to their future plans. Talking to my mother was even more frustrating. She specialized in weaponized concern. Oh, Sarah, we're just worried you're burning yourself out. This deal took so much out of you. It's time for you to take a step back, let others handle the day-to-day. Burning myself out? I'm energized by this. This is what I trained for, what I'm good at. Yes, dear, but management is different. It requires a steady hand, someone who understands the people. You're very good with the numbers and the strategy, but perhaps not the delicate balance of running things. The implication was clear. I was good at the abstract, the external, the things that didn't involve leading their people or fitting into their internal hierarchy. David was good with the delicate balance, meaning he was their chosen one, the one they trusted with the core of the company, even if he hadn't brought in the deal of a lifetime. The full extent of the betrayal became horrifyingly clear a month later. I was called into a meeting with my parents and David. My father started, his tone formal, lacking any warmth. Sarah, we've reassessed the organizational structure in light of the upcoming changes with the joint venture. To ensure a smooth integration and maintain focus on our core operations, we've decided to make some adjustments. I sat there, a cold dread creeping into my stomach. David will be heading the joint venture integration unit, my mother announced, a proud smile directed at my brother. David gave a small, self-satisfied nod. As for your role, Sarah, my father continued, avoiding my eyes. Given the shift in focus, your position as head of strategic partnerships is being restructured. We're creating a new role, senior market analyst. It will involve researching potential new markets, providing data to the sales team. It's a vital function, of course. Senior market analyst. It was a demotion, a significant one. It was the role I'd held 7 years ago when I first joined the company, albeit with a senior tacked on. It was taking me from a high-level executive function responsible for billion-dollar deals and strategic direction and placing me back in a research support role, reporting to people I used to collaborate with as peers. It was a slap in the face so hard it made my ears ring. I stared at them, speechless. My mind struggled to process the sheer absurdity, the breathtaking injustice of it. I had just landed a $3 billion deal that secured their company's future, and their response was to strip me of my position and relegate me to a role far below my expertise and recent achievements. Are you serious? I finally managed to stammer out. My mother's expression softened into that familiar, patronizing concern. Sarah, darling, it's for the best. This new venture is complex. It needs experienced hands at the helm. David has been with the company longer in a leadership capacity. Leadership capacity? He sat back and watched while I worked myself to the bone for this deal. I retorted, my voice shaking with suppressed fury. He doubted it every step of the way. And now he gets to integrate it. My father slammed his hand lightly on the table. That is enough, Sarah. You will accept the decision. David is the vice president. This is a management decision based on years of experience and demonstrated leadership within the company structure. Demonstrated leadership? David's primary leadership demonstration seemed to be maintaining the status quo and being the son they preferred. It was clear this wasn't a business decision based on merit. It was a family decision based on favoritism and a deep-seated fear of disrupting the established order, an order where David was heir apparent, and I was what? The useful tool who had become too prominent, too threatening to the narrative they had built. The rest of the meeting was a blur of me trying to argue, to reason, to make them see the illogic and the unfairness, and them shutting me down with platitudes about teamwork, company structure, and doing what's best for everyone. They painted the demotion as a necessary step for the company, and my reaction as emotional and unprofessional. David sat there mostly silent, occasionally adding a comment that subtly reinforced their points, his gaze carefully avoiding mine. I walked out of that office feeling hollowed out, like a shell. The betrayal was complete. It wasn't just about a job title or responsibilities. It was about my worth, my identity within my own family, and the company I had helped build. They didn't see me as a brilliant strategist, a valuable asset, a partner in their success. They saw me as a subordinate who had momentarily overstepped, who needed to be put back in her place, a place defined by them, far below the golden sun. The emotional impact was devastating. This wasn't just colleagues. This was my family. The people who were supposed to be my biggest cheerleaders had actively undermined me, taken credit for my success by reassigning the leadership role on the venture, and punished me for achieving something extraordinary. The toxic dynamic of our relationship, the years of subtle criticism and downplaying, culminated in this blatant act of professional and personal invalidation. I went home and just sat in silence for hours, the weight of it crushing me. Every doubt I'd ever had about my place in the family, every fear that I wasn't quite good enough, not in the way David was, resurfaced with brutal clarity. It hurt more than any professional setback because it was delivered by the people whose love and approval I had craved my entire life. Over the next few days, I moved through a fog of disbelief and pain. I tried talking to individual family members again, outside the formal setting. I spoke to my aunt, my father's sister, hoping for some understanding. She listened patiently, but her response was disheartening. Sarah, your parents have worked their whole lives for this company. David has been training to lead it since he was a boy. Sometimes the older generation just isn't comfortable with such big changes. And David is family. You can't expect them to put a business deal, no matter how large, ahead of family continuity. Family continuity. That was it. My success, my ability to bring in something revolutionary, threatened their predefined path, David's inheritance. I was a disruptor, not a savior. And in their eyes, disruption was bad, even if it brought billions. The misunderstanding and misrepresentation were clear. They weren't just demoting me. They were rewriting the narrative. They were framing my achievement as a temporary anomaly, something external I brought in, but not something that fundamentally changed their company or my place within it. They were representing me as someone who couldn't handle the follow-through, who needed to be managed and contained. I had a few awkward interactions with David. He acted as if nothing significant had happened, talking about the exciting challenges of integrating the joint venture, occasionally asking me for specific data points I had gathered during negotiations, treating me like a research assistant. I saw firsthand how quickly he was stepping into the role I should have had, leveraging the relationships I had built with the partner corporation, basking in the glow of the deal I had secured. The pain was compounded by the public humiliation. Within the company, everyone knew what had happened. The whispers, the sympathetic or curious glances, were unbearable. I was the high flyer who had crashed, brought low by her own family. Some colleagues were kind, expressing shock and disappointment. Others seemed to accept the company line, perhaps out of self-preservation. The demotion wasn't just professional, it felt deeply personal, a rejection of who I was and what I was capable of. I struggled to work in my new role. The tasks felt trivial, soul-crushing. Every spreadsheet, every market report, was a reminder of where I had been and how far I had fallen, pushed by the very people who should have lifted me higher. I felt a profound sense of grief, mourning not just the loss of my position, but the loss of the family I thought I had, the shared vision I believed we held. I considered leaving immediately, but a part of me, the part that was stubborn and deeply wounded, wanted to understand. I wanted to see if there was any way to salvage the situation, to make them see. I also needed time to figure out what came next. I couldn't stay there, not in that diminished capacity, not under that cloud of betrayal. It was eroding my self-respect, my confidence. The turning point came during a particularly painful conversation with my mother. I tried one last time to appeal to her. "Mom, how can you let this happen? How can you let them do this after everything I did?" She looked at me, not with warmth, but with a kind of weary determination. "Sarah, you need to understand. This company, it's our life. Your father and I built it. David will inherit it. It needs stability. You brought in this big, flashy deal, yes, but David knows how we run things, he knows our people. He's reliable. You're unpredictable, always chasing the next big thing. We need someone steady at the helm for this integration." Unpredictable? Is that what bringing in a $3 billion deal is? Unpredictable? I asked, my voice incredulous. "It's not how we do things, Sarah. We build things slowly, carefully. This was too much, too fast. And honestly, it made David uncomfortable. He felt overshadowed. We need to support him." There it was, the raw, ugly truth. It wasn't about my capability, the deal's success, or the company's future potential as much as it was about protecting David's fragile ego and their predefined succession plan. I had become too big, too successful, too independent, and it threatened the established order. My demotion was not a strategic restructuring. It was a punitive measure, a way to cut me down to size, to put me back in the box they had built for me, a box where I was useful, but never challenging to the golden sun. In that moment, something inside me snapped. The desperate need for their approval, the years of trying to fit myself into their mold, dissolved. I saw them clearly, not as flawed but loving parents, but as people who prioritized control and a flawed, outdated vision over fairness, merit, and the well-being of their own child. The toxic nature of our relationship, the constant need to prove myself against invisible metrics, the subtle ways they had always diminished my achievements, all led to this. I realized I would never get the validation I craved from them because their system was rigged against anyone who didn't fit their narrow definition of success and loyalty, a definition that conveniently centered around David. I left that conversation not with tears, but with a quiet, simmering rage and a steely resolve. I wouldn't fight for my place in their company anymore. I wouldn't beg for their approval. I would leave. And I wouldn't just leave. I would build something of my own. Something better. Something that would show them exactly what they had discarded. The idea formed slowly, then solidified into a concrete plan. I wouldn't be just an ex-employee. I would become their biggest competitor. My immediate priority was securing my financial situation and gathering everything I needed. While in my demoted role, I had limited access to sensitive information, but I had spent years building my own network, gathering market intelligence independently. I used my time wisely, researching potential investors, identifying key personnel within the industry who were disillusioned or looking for a change, refining the business plan that had begun to form in my mind. My plan was audacious. I would leverage my expertise in international strategic partnerships and my in-depth knowledge of the industry's future direction, the very skills they had just tried to stifle. I would target the opportunities created by the market gap they were ignoring by clinging to their traditional model, a gap that the $3 billion joint venture had highlighted, but that they were now mishandling. I didn't announce my resignation. I waited until I had secured initial funding commitments and identified a small, core team of exceptionally talented people who believed in my vision. People who, perhaps, had also felt stifled or overlooked in their own corporate environments. There were a few key individuals at my parents' company who had supported me quietly, who were appalled by my demotion. I couldn't recruit them directly yet, but I knew they were watching. The day I resigned was anticlimactic and powerful all at once. I walked into my father's office, handed him a formal resignation letter, effective immediately. He looked surprised, then annoyed. Resigning? Sarah, don't be rash. You have a job here. A good job. It's not a good job, Dad. It's a demotion after I secured a deal that should have propelled me forward. I can't work here anymore. I can't work for people who don't value me. My mother was called in. Her reaction was a mix of feigned hurt and thinly veiled anger. After everything we've done for you, Sarah, this is how you repay us. Repay you, I repeated, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. By working myself to the bone, bringing in the deal of a lifetime, and being pushed aside for it. I owe you my effort and my skill, which I've given tenfold. I don't owe you my silence or my diminished potential. David came in, drawn by the raised voices. He looked smug. Leaving, Sarah? Finally realized you couldn't handle the pressure? That comment, so typical of his dismissiveness, was the final confirmation I needed. They genuinely believed I was running away, not launching something bigger. No, David, I said, looking him directly in the eye. I'm not running away. I'm building my own table because there's no room for me at yours. And you'll be hearing from me. I left the office that day with a mix of exhilaration and terror. I had cut the cord. There was no safety net, no family business to fall back on. It was just me and my vision. The next few months were the hardest of my life. I poured every ounce of energy, every dollar I had, into building my new company. It was a bootstrap operation at first, working out of a rented co-working space, relying on favors and the good faith of my initial team. We focused on agile development, cutting-edge technology, and, critically, nurturing the international relationships I had cultivated. My experience with the $3 billion venture, the insights I had gained into the partner corporation's needs and the market's potential, were invaluable. I knew exactly what was needed, and I knew where my parents' company, stuck in its traditional ways, would fall short. Building a company from scratch is a monumental task. There were days filled with doubt, sleepless nights consumed by anxiety about funding, sales, and payroll. But there was also an incredible sense of freedom and purpose. I was building something based on merit, on innovation, on a culture that valued contribution and recognized effort. My team was small but dedicated, fueled by a shared belief in what we were doing. We weren't held back by legacy systems, outdated thinking, or family drama. We were lean, fast, and forward-looking. The first major victory came when we landed a significant contract with a company that was a direct competitor of my parents' joint venture partner. It was a smaller deal, but it put us on the map. It validated our approach and proved we could execute. News travels fast in the industry. My parents and David heard about it. I didn't hear from them directly, but I imagine the conversations, the surprise, perhaps even a flicker of grudging respect, quickly overshadowed by annoyance. Our growth was steady, fueled by smart strategic choices and a relentless focus on delivering value. We were innovative, responsive, everything my parents' company, burdened by its history and internal politics, struggled to be. We started attracting attention, not just from clients, but from investors and talent within the industry. Some of the people I had wanted to recruit from my old company reached out, disillusioned by the changes, or lack thereof, under David's leadership. I welcomed them aboard, creating a team that was not just skilled, but also deeply committed to our shared vision. The moment of direct confrontation came about 2 years later. My company had grown significantly. We were no longer a small startup. We were a recognized player, a disruptor in the market my family had dominated for decades. We were competing directly for the same clients, often winning bids against them. We had even started making inroads with the international corporation I had brought in, offering them faster, more flexible solutions for projects outside the scope of the original joint venture. A major industry conference was scheduled, a key event where all the significant players would be present. My company had secured a prominent booth, and I was invited to speak on a panel about the future of the industry, a panel that David had also been invited to as a representative of the established guard. Walking into that conference hall, seeing my company's logo alongside those of industry giants, including the company my parents ran, was surreal. I saw David across the hall, talking to a group of people. Our eyes met. His expression shifted from polite networking smile to stunned, then hostile recognition. It was the first time we had been in the same room since I resigned. Later, we were both backstage before our panel. The tension was thick. My parents weren't there. They usually avoided large public events, preferring to operate behind the scenes. But David was there, the symbol of the system that had cast me out. He approached me, his voice low and tight.
Sarah.
I see you've done well for yourself. I have, David. Funny what you can achieve when you're not being held back. He bristled. Held back. You abandoned the family, just when we needed you for the integration of that deal you were so proud of. Needed me. I laughed, a short, sharp sound devoid of humor.
You didn't need me, David. You demoted me. You sidelined me.
You needed me gone because my success made you uncomfortable. That's not fair. It was a strategic decision.
Was it?
To take the person who negotiated a $3 billion deal and put them in a market analyst role? Was that truly strategic, David? Or was it about protecting your position at my expense? He sputtered, unable to meet my gaze. You always made everything about you, Sarah. It's a family business, not a personal platform. And what about my place in that family? What about my contributions? Were they less valuable because they weren't part of your predetermined plan? I finally said the words that had been burning inside me for years. You didn't value me. You didn't respect me. You saw me as a threat to your inheritance. That demotion wasn't just professional. It was a statement that I didn't belong. Not really, not in the way you did. He had no real answer. He muttered something about loyalty and family, but it rang hollow, even to him, I think. The validation I had once craved from them, felt less important in that moment than stating my truth, owning my experience, and standing there as living proof of their mistake. I wasn't the sidelined researcher anymore. I was the founder and CEO of a thriving company, standing shoulder to shoulder with him on a public stage, on my own terms. The panel itself was a strange experience. David spoke about maintaining tradition, the importance of established processes. I spoke about innovation, agility, the need to embrace change, and build new partnerships. The contrast was stark, and the audience picked up on it. Questions were directed my way about our rapid growth, our forward-thinking approach. David looked increasingly uncomfortable. It wasn't a vengeful triumph. It was simply the reality of the situation. My success was the most potent answer to their betrayal. After the conference, the dynamics shifted again. My parents didn't reach out directly to apologize or acknowledge my success. That wasn't their way. But the subtle shifts were noticeable. When there were articles about my company, they were sometimes clipped and left on the kitchen table, almost accidentally. My mother mentioned in passing to a relative who then reported back to me that they were surprised by how well my company was doing, that I was proving to be quite capable. It wasn't an apology, not by a long shot, but it was a tacit acknowledgement, delivered in their roundabout way. David and I maintained a distant, professional relationship. We were competitors now. There were no more pretense of sibling camaraderie in the business world. We negotiated deals sometimes we won, sometimes they did. The personal hurt was still there, a scar that might never fully fade, but it was no longer an open wound dictating my every move. The rivalry, oddly enough, created a new, albeit strained, form of respect. He saw I wasn't going away, that I was a force to be reckoned with. And I saw that while he might never fully understand the depth of the betrayal, he had to contend with its consequences, my company's existence. Our familial relationship became a thing of carefully managed boundaries. We saw each other at major holidays, but the easy intimacy was gone. Conversations stayed on the surface, avoiding the elephants in the room. The company, the demotion, the years of pain. I had learned to protect myself, to not expose my vulnerabilities to people who had shown they would exploit them. I had built a new family in a way, my team, my friends, people who celebrated my successes and supported me through challenges, unconditionally. The struggle for validation was over because I had validated myself. I had built my own success, defined my own worth outside of their system. The truth was, I hadn't needed their permission or their approval to be capable, to be successful. I had needed to break free from their limitations, their fears, their toxic dynamics, to truly flourish. Setting boundaries was crucial. It meant saying no to invitations that felt like traps, limiting the time spent in triggering environments, and refusing to engage in conversations that pulled me back into the old patterns of seeking their approval. It was hard, sometimes lonely, but necessary for my emotional health. I had to accept that our relationship would never be what I had once desperately wanted it to be, a close-knit family unit where everyone celebrated each other's triumphs. It was something different now, something fractured but perhaps healthier in its distance and redefined expectations. The process of boundary setting and personal growth wasn't linear. There were moments of doubt, moments when the old hurts resurfaced. But with each challenge I overcame in my business, with each step I took forward in my personal life, I grew stronger, more confident in my own judgment and abilities. The eventual resolution isn't a perfect Hollywood ending with tearful apologies and a grand reunion. It's more complex, more real. It's an acceptance of changed dynamics. My parents and David are still in my life, but they are no longer the central figures. They are family by blood, but the deep emotional connection, the trust that was shattered, has never fully healed. Maybe it never will. And I've come to accept that that's okay. I built my own success. I proved my own worth, not to them, but to myself. This experience taught me that seeking validation from those who are incapable of giving it is a futile and destructive pursuit. It taught me the immense power of believing in yourself, even when the people closest to you don't. It taught me the importance of setting boundaries, even with family, to protect your peace and your sense of self. It was a painful journey, filled with moments of profound hurt and uncertainty. But it led me to build a life and a career that are authentically mine, built on my own terms, fueled by my own passion, and surrounded by people who see and value the real me. I lost a certain version of my family, but I found myself. And that was the most valuable joint venture of all. Thank you for listening to my story. It takes courage to revisit these painful moments, but I hope that sharing it might help someone else out there who is going through something similar. If you have faced betrayal from family or people you trusted, or if you've had to build your own path after being underestimated, please share your experience in the comments below. Reading your stories helps us all feel less alone. If this story resonated with you, if you felt that knot in your stomach or that surge of indignant energy, please hit that like button. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about navigating complex relationships, finding your voice, and reclaiming your power. Remember, your worth is not determined by someone else's inability to see it. Keep building, keep growing, and always speak your truth.